I grew up deeply in Jewish community. And I start there because as I've moved through my life and considered questions of belonging and authenticity and privilege, I know that I start from a place where I believe I belong, because my Jewish family was filled with love and support and learning and Yiddishkeit and prayer and song. My parents were part of the Chavurah movement, creating traditional egalitarian communities that they were deeply a part of, where we were empowered to be full and engaged members, creating what we needed for our family, for our Jewish life, for our spiritual life, that filled us deeply. I grew up in a family that was deeply connected to Israel. My father, of blessed memory, devoted his life to the pursuit of peace between Arabs and Israelis. And on a personal level, we were so deeply connected and are so deeply connected to our family in Israel. That was part of who we are every day and informed the sense of belonging that animates me. I remember very clearly sitting in shul on the high holidays and hearing that the conservative movement was going to begin ordaining women. I was middle school age and I was confused because in our Chavurah, we were fully egalitarian. Women led everything, counted in minyan, were deeply ingrained in the spiritual and practical leadership of the community. And I understood simultaneously that this was a really big deal. And also I didn't totally understand what had taken so long for that movement to get there. I came of age as a young adult, going to college, having for the first time the opportunity to help create my own Jewish community, not just the community I had inherited from my parents, and that was created really for us, for my sisters and me and our peers by our parents, who worried about how we would fully inhabit our Jewish life. And so there I was in the early 90s in a Jewish community that I actually got to help create at a time when the Reform movement decided for the very first time to ordain openly gay and lesbian rabbis at the Hebrew Union College. And the conservative movement decided not to do so, to study the issue, and made the decision that the Jewish Theological Seminary, the conservative movement, would not ordain openly gay and lesbian students as rabbis. Now, we of course all knew, even then, that there had been gay and lesbian rabbis for a long time who were not allowed, or who were not able to be out, who were not able to be open in the fullness of themselves. That coinciding of the law committee of the conservative movement making that decision, of JTS doubling down on that decision not to ordain openly gay and lesbian students as rabbis, came at the same time, as I said, as I was for the first time in a position of Jewish communal leadership in my own Hillel community, and at a time when my own sister had recently come out as a lesbian and discovered another surprise, that our very progressive community was struggling. I thought we were raised to be open, to be supportive, to be feminists, to be supportive of LGBT rights. And then, when it came to the own intimacy of our community, it was suddenly a very big deal. And a lot of people really, really struggled. And I remember as a young adult feeling that betrayal, that disappointment, that pain, and feeling like, okay, it's time for our generation to move this forward. And just as we were always taught that the students could be the teachers, this was a moment where we had a responsibility to take the values that we were taught about creating communities that met our spiritual and communal needs and keep opening them wider. And so I had the great joy in my college community at the time of a lot of communal turmoil to be making decisions to say, I don't want the door to be just open wide enough to let me in. It's also my responsibility and my privilege and my joy to make sure that it's open wider. And so we in our Hillel community were one of the first Hillels to say, we are going to be a community that is fully open and embracing of LGBT people. Or I guess at the time it was LGB people, we were just learning, to open the door further. I was really blessed to be part of a community of other student activists in college, to have the leadership of Rabbi Alan Flam, who was the leader of our Brown University Hillel, who really wanted to encourage us to grow in leadership and be who we wanted to be. And so as I grew in my own decisions to become a rabbi, I decided that I wanted to study at the Jewish Theological Seminary, which for me was a moment of both acknowledging the importance of changing from within and the power of shifting the center. What does it mean to shift the center so that the assumptions that are made by the majority of a community change profoundly? For me, when I made the decision to study there, it was part of the decision to help move the movement, to open the door wider. I knew very well that I was there as a woman because of work that had happened a generation before me, and that it was my responsibility to do that work for the next generation, to acknowledge those who had done the work to make my presence possible, and to do the work for the next step. When I began my career at Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, learning under Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum, who had been leading that community already for a decade, a community which since 1973 had been speaking one person to another, face to face, to insist on the humanity of LGBT people and the need for the Jewish community to expand and acknowledge and grow and celebrate its full reality. I learned how important it is to acknowledge one's privilege and to use one's privilege to move the conversation forward. As a person who doesn't question my own belonging in Jewish spaces and Jewish community, it is my responsibility to use that to open Jewish community wider, to honor those who have done the work to get us here. I'm now the dean of the rabbinical school at JTS. To be in the leadership of a legacy organization, which includes rich history and debates and mistakes, which includes the legacy of Solomon Schechter and Henrietta Zold and Mordechai Kaplan and Abraham Joshua Heschel. We need to be able to own that history, to acknowledge their learning, and to acknowledge the mistakes that were made. That Henrietta Zold was allowed to pursue study at JTS because she swore that she would not pursue rabbinical ordination. That Abraham Joshua Heschel, in his tremendous leadership, was not appreciated for his opposition to the Vietnam War, for his insistence on the Jewish community working hard in partnership with the civil rights movement. To hold the legacy is to honor both the rich history and not to paper over what was done wrong so that we can move forward in the fullness. And that remains true. We are in a time right now of tremendous upheaval in American democracy, in the relationship with Israel. As someone who has never questioned my own connection to Jewish community, my own deep connection and responsibility to Israel, I too have been targeted often. First, when I was a very, very young rabbi, I was nearly thrown out of the rabbinical assembly because it hadn't occurred to anyone that as an ally, we can have tremendous power to move the conversation forward. That policies that keep out individuals, a policy that denies ordination to LGBT people, could be intended to keep that conversation quiet. But as allies, we have the opportunity to say, I'm in, and I'm moving this conversation forward. And often, people aren't prepared for that, and that's where we can do change. So we all have the opportunity to think about, where do we hold privilege? Where do we deeply belong? And what is our responsibility as allies to others to make sure we are opening the door further? And in this moment, we need to think about, who are we keeping in, who are we keeping out? When I first ascended to the role of Dean of JTS, the opposition around me actually had nothing to do with my history of work on LGBT equality in the movement, because it was so long ago, it's taken for granted now, nobody thinks about it. Everybody thinks that's just how it is now. It was actually because I'm on record opposing the occupation, I'm on record in progressive Israel communities. And so that was used as an argument against my fitness for this role. And again, this is a place where I say, I know I belong. When I hear arguments like that, I worry less about my own Zionism, which I know is strong, and more about our Jewish community and whether we have the capacity to really hold complexity. We need to use words like belonging in their deepest, most complex senses, not to paper over those differences, to really ask ourselves, how wide is the door that we are opening? How deep are the conversations that we are having? How can we use the responsibility of our own belonging, of our own privilege, to build communities that can hold the difficult conversations, hold the mistakes we have made, and still lift up the voices of all of those who have come before us, all of those now, and all of those who are yet to come, who will create change and help heal what is so broken in our world. Thank you.